On a quiet Sunday morning in December 1941, Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor had shattered the illusion of American invincibility. Battleships lay smoldering in the Hawaiian sun, and across the Pacific, the rising sun flag flew over territories once thought untouchable: the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies. The Japanese Empire seemed unstoppable, sweeping across the map with precision and purpose. But beneath this tide of victory, there was a quiet unease. Even as Tokyo celebrated, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind Pearl Harbor, knew the danger of waking a giant. He understood America's vast industry, its ability to rebuild and adapt. Japan's triumph was dazzling, but it was also fleeting, unless the United States could be crushed before it could fully rise. By the spring of 1942, that urgency turned into a bold plan, a decisive blow to sink America's remaining carriers and break its spirit. The target, a small, isolated atoll halfway between Asia and North America, a speck in the ocean known as Midway. Far from the battle lines, life continued almost normally. Mechanics at Pearl Harbor worked around the clock to patch together ships and aircraft. Intelligence officers pored over coded messages from the Japanese Navy, unaware that within those lines lay the key to everything. The Pacific's calm was deceptive, a fragile silence before one of history's most decisive clashes, and soon that silence would be broken by fire, courage, and fate. You are watching Erahive, where history speaks. Yamamoto's grand gamble. In the heart of Tokyo, within the smoke-filled war rooms of the Imperial Navy, a quiet tension brewed. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto sat before a map of the Pacific, his sharp eyes tracing the long stretch between Japan and Hawaii. Victories of the past months had been dazzling, but they were not enough. He knew that time was not Japan's ally. Every day, American factories churned out more planes, more ships, more fuel. Japan's early conquests had secured resources, but not safety. Yamamoto understood something few others dared to admit. Japan could not win a long war. To secure victory, it needed a decisive blow, one that would crush America's spirit and force it to negotiate. That blow, he believed, would come at Midway. The plan was bold and complex. Japanese carriers would strike the island, drawing out the remaining American carriers for a decisive engagement. The Imperial Navy would destroy them, securing the Pacific once and for all. Meanwhile, a separate force would attack the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, serving as a diversion. But beneath the confidence lay flaws: too many moving parts, too much secrecy. The Japanese assumed their enemy was still reeling, blind and broken after Pearl Harbor. They didn't know that America was already watching, listening, and slowly decoding their every move. Yamamoto called his plan Operation MI, but in his heart he knew it was a gamble. A single misstep would turn triumph into disaster. And somewhere, far across the ocean, the Americans were already beginning to sense that a storm was coming, cracking the code. In a dimly lit room at Pearl Harbor, far from the roar of engines and the crash of waves, a different kind of battle was unfolding. A battle of minds. Rows of typewriters clattered, cigarette smoke curled through the air. Behind the noise sat a small group of cryptanalysts, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, a quiet man in a rumpled uniform and slippers. His weapon wasn't a gun or a plane, it was patience. The U.S. Navy's codebreakers had spent months intercepting and analyzing Japanese transmissions. The enemy's radio messages were encrypted under the system known as JN-25, a complex numerical cipher thought impossible to crack. But piece by piece, Rochefort's team began to see patterns, fragments of a plan taking shape. By late May 1942, they noticed constant references to a location called AF. The Japanese were preparing to strike there, but no one knew where AF was. Was it Hawaii, the West Coast, Australia? Rochefort had a hunch AF was Midway. To confirm it, he devised a clever trap. He ordered Midway's garrison to send an unencrypted message, claiming their freshwater system had broken down. Within hours, Japanese intelligence reported that AF was short on water. It was the proof they needed. Midway was the target. And now, for the first time since Pearl Harbor, America had the upper hand knowledge before battle. While Yamamoto believed his fleet was sailing toward surprise and glory, Admiral Chester Nimitz was already preparing a trap of his own. 3 U.S. carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown were moving into position. The stage was set. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The trap is set. The morning of the 3rd of June, 1942, dawned calm and clear over the Pacific. But beneath the stillness, two mighty fleets were closing in on each other. Neither yet aware how fate would intertwine their destinies. From the decks of the Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hairu, the air hummed with precision and discipline. Crews polished metal, adjusted torpedoes, and whispered quiet prayers. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commanding the strike force, was confident. His fleet had never known defeat. Behind him, Yamamoto's battleships steamed hundreds of miles away, waiting for the decisive blow. Far to the east, hidden in the vast blue expanse, lay Midway Atoll, a small ring of coral and sand, but now the hinge of the Pacific War. Its airfields were braced for impact. American soldiers, pilots, and mechanics prepared for what they knew would come. They had no illusions. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing the veterans of Pearl Harbor. Yet, they had one critical advantage: forewarning. Admiral Chester Nimitz, cool and methodical, had positioned his own carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown northeast of Midway, beyond Japan's sight. There, in the open sea, he waited for Nagumo to strike first. As the sun dipped low, U.S. reconnaissance planes scoured the horizon. The tension was almost unbearable. Every radar blip, every coded message could mean life or death. Then, just before midnight, a faint voice crackled over the radio. Enemy ships sighted. The trap was ready. The pieces had been set in motion. By morning, the calm Pacific would erupt, and the fate of nations would hang in the balance. The 4th of June, 1942, the day the Pacific erupted into flame. At dawn, the Japanese launched their first wave of aircraft toward Midway Atoll. The sky roared with the sound of engines as dozens of bombers and fighters soared across the endless blue. Below them, the island defenders scrambled to meet the onslaught. American anti-aircraft guns thundered, filling the air with black puffs of smoke. Midway burned, fuel tanks exploded, hangars crumbled. Yet, amid the chaos, the U.S. Marines held firm, fighting not for victory, but for survival. Out at sea, Admiral Nagumo received conflicting reports. The attack on Midway was incomplete. The island still stood, and his pilots requested a second strike. But then came another report. American ships had been sighted nearby. Nagumo hesitated. His planes were in the air, his decks crowded with rearming crews. Should he reload for another island assault or prepare for a naval battle? Minutes turned into fatal indecision. Bombs, torpedoes, and fuel lay side by side across the hangar decks of his carriers, a recipe for catastrophe waiting to ignite. Meanwhile, American aircraft from Midway and the carriers Hornet, Enterprise, and Yorktown took off in waves. Their mission was desperate to find and strike the Japanese fleet before it could unleash another blow. The first to arrive were the torpedo squadrons, low-flying, slow, and terribly vulnerable. Japanese fighters cut through them mercilessly. Plane after plane fell into the sea. Entire squadrons were wiped out. Not a single torpedo found its mark. Yet, through that sacrifice came an unexpected gift. The Japanese combat air patrol had been drawn low, chasing the doomed torpedo planes, and high above, unseen, another group was diving toward Destiny. At 10:22 a.m. on June 4th, Destiny arrived not with thunder, but with a scream from the sky. From high above the clouds, U.S. Navy dive bombers of Enterprise and Yorktown emerged from the sun. After hours of searching and near disaster, they had finally found the Japanese fleet, its decks cluttered with planes refueling and rearming. Below, 4 proud carriers sailed in formation, unaware of the doom above them. As the bombers rolled into their dives, time seemed to freeze. Pilots like Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey and Dick Best lined up their targets, the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. The ocean vanished in a blur of wind and fire. Bombs fell one after another, striking the heart of the Imperial Navy. In mere minutes, 3 of Japan's elite carriers erupted into infernos. Flames tore through decks, loaded with fuel and ammunition. Pilots still strapped in their cockpits were consumed by explosions. Men leapt into the sea, their ships dying behind them. Admiral Nagumo watched helplessly as the pride of Japan's fleet was engulfed. In the chaos, only Hiru survived, and she struck back with vengeance. Her planes soared toward the Yorktown, hitting her with 2 bombs and a torpedo. The proud carrier, which had barely survived the Coral Sea, went dead in the water. But even that counterstrike could not change the tide. The Americans had seized the moment. The hunter had become the hunted. As the sun began to fall over the Pacific, the ocean burned with the wreckage of Japan's shattered hopes. The battle was not yet over, but the outcome had already been written in fire. Night fell on June 4th, 1942, and with it, the age of Japanese dominance in the Pacific began to fade. The once proud Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu were gone, now only twisted metal beneath the waves. Their surviving crews clung to debris, their lifeboats boats drifting through oil-slick waters lit by distant fires. But one carrier still fought on, the Hairu. Admiral Yamamoto, still far to the west aboard his flagship Yamato, refused to believe the scale of the disaster. He ordered Hairu to strike again, one last, desperate blow. Her planes found Yorktown listing but still afloat. 2 more bombs tore into her decks, sealing her fate. The ship that had survived 2 major battles finally succumbed, her crew evacuating in solemn silence as she slipped beneath the sea 2 days later. Soon after, American dive bombers located the Hairu. The last Japanese carrier was hit repeatedly. Flames spread, ammunition cooked off, and by nightfall, she too joined her sisters at the bottom of the Pacific. The next morning, Admiral Nagumo's once invincible fleet was in ruins. 4 carriers, more than 250 planes, and thousands of Japan's most experienced pilots were lost. The Japanese Navy had been dealt a wound it would never truly recover from. For the United States, the victory was almost unbelievable. The psychological weight of Pearl Harbor began to lift. In every American port, radios crackled with the news Midway had been saved. But among those who had fought, there was little celebration. The sea had taken too many lives from both sides. Floating wreckage, oil fires, and silence marked the end of the battle, a reminder that victory at sea always came at a terrible price. The Pacific, once calm, now whispered of a changing tide. The smoke had cleared. The ocean was calm again, but the Pacific would never be the same. In just 4 days, Japan's dreams of dominance had sunk beneath the waves. The Battle of Midway was more than a clash of ships. It was a turning point in history. 4 of Japan's elite fleet carriers destroyed, hundreds of irreplaceable airmen lost, and with them, the Empire's ability to fight a long naval war. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Japan's expansion, withdrew his shattered fleet into silence. He knew the truth. Japan could still fight bravely, but it could no longer win decisively. The balance had shifted permanently. For the United States, Midway was a miracle of preparation, intelligence, and courage. Codebreakers had pierced Japan's secrets. Admirals had trusted their instincts. Pilots had flown into hopeless missions so that others might strike true. Every piece, from the minds behind the radios to the men in burning cockpits, had mattered. From that day onward, the Pacific belonged not to the rising sun, but to the rising tide of American resolve. Yet amid the triumph, there was quiet reflection. Midway had not been won by numbers or machines alone, but by people who refused to give up when the odds seemed impossible. Men like Wade McCluskey, who chose to keep searching when fuel was running low, or the torpedo pilots who gave their lives, clearing the skies for others to strike. Their courage turned the course of the war. The Battle of Midway stands today as a testament to sacrifice, intelligence, and fate, where fortune favored the brave, and where a few minutes decided the future of the world. Because sometimes, history turns not on the might of empires, but on the quiet courage of those who dare to fight back. You are watching Erahive, where history speaks.